Hi guys, today we're going to be looking at grade 10 simultaneous equations. Okay, so when doing math, it's very important to ask yourself questions like what are simultaneous equations and how are they different from normal equations. You see, if you have a normal equation where you have something like 2x equals 8, you can just divide on both sides and you can get that x now equals 4. But now what happens when we have two variables? Okay, so when you have two variables like a simultaneous equation, you have something like x plus y equals 2, and then you have 2x plus y equals 10. Now we can't use this method that we have before to do it, so that is where simultaneous equations come in, where we have two variables. So the difference between a simultaneous equation, right, and a normal equation is a simultaneous equation has two variables or more, whereas a normal equation just has one variable. And we can use the techniques that we've learned from grade 8 and 9 and we can solve these. All right? So that there also answers why do we use simultaneous equation. The elimination method, and we can use substitution method. So first we're going to start off with the elimination method. So we'll use the example that we have on the top, right? We have x plus y equals 2, okay? And then we have 2x plus y, and that there gives us 10. So how do we solve this? So in the elimination method, what we're going to do is, if these two can cancel out, right, which is what we have right here, where we have a y and a y, we are just going to subtract them. So we're going to do like, remember when you were grade 3 or 4, you did addition and subtraction going downwards on a page, but now you have a calculator, so you're kind of cheating. So we're going to go back to that. So we're going to put a subtraction sign here. We're going to put it like how we used to have our equals. Okay, we're going to have x minus this 2x, right? And that there will give us negative x, okay? And then we're going to have y minus y, they'll cancel off. 2 minus this 10 will give us negative 8, okay? And then since we have that, right, we can then go and say that negative 8, okay, equals negative x, right, which is what I have here, and then you get x equals 8. Now from that step, what you do is, now that we know that x equals 8, right, we're going to go and say substitute back into one of our equations. So we're going to go 8 plus y, okay, equals 2. Okay, and now we'll just solve. We'll say y equals 2 minus 8, and that there will give us y equals negative 6. So this here very simply is the substitute elimination method. So very simply, this is the elimination method. Okay, so let's just make this all this look a bit neater. So this method works really well when we have a y and a y, or we have an x and an x, and those variables can cancel out if you subtract them. Okay, another case of that may be when we have, let's say now we have x minus y, okay, equals 2, and then we have 2x plus y equals 10. So the difference here is, instead of this being a positive, it's now a negative. So if I wanted to cancel off these y's, I wouldn't subtract them, I would now add them, because negative y plus y would then cancel out. So I'll put a plus here. I'll then get 3x equals negative 8, okay, and then I'll get x equals negative 8 over 3, right? I'm then going to substitute that there. back in to my equation. So I'll have negative 8 over 3, okay, minus y equals 2, okay. Then I'm going to have minus y equals 2 and 8 over 3, and then y equals negative 2 and 8 over 3. Okay, makes sense. Now going to move on to something that's slightly more complicated, but still using the same method, and then after that you'll have all the examples on knowing how to use this method. Okay, we're now going to move on to our final method for the elimination method, right? The final type of question they can ask you, okay? And this is when you have variables that can't cancel out from adding or subtracting. So if I had, for example, 2x plus y, okay, equals 10, right? And then I had 3x plus 2y, okay, equals 30. Now, if you look at this, if I was to add or subtract, so if I added, I then get 5x, okay, plus 3y. And now I'm still stuck with two variables, so that doesn't really help me out. Now let's see, if I was to subtract them, I get negative x, okay, minus y. And I'm still left with two variables, so I can't do that. That isn't what we're trying to do. When you're doing the elimination method, we're trying to eliminate one of the variables. So what you need to do instead is rewrite one of the equations. So let's take this one, okay, and we're going to rewrite it. So we're going to try and make the y's look the same. And how we'll do that is if we multiply every term by 2. So I have 2x plus y equals 10, okay, and then there will then become 4x plus 2y equals 20. Okay, now I have this 2y here, okay. Now what I can do is I can then rewrite this as 3x plus 2y equals 30, and now I can subtract them because my y's are the same. So when I subtract these, I'm going to be left with x, these y's, 2y and 2y will cancel out, and I'm left with minus 10. Now that I know that x equals minus 10, I can then substitute into my formula. I can say 2 multiplied by minus 10, okay, plus y equals 10. So that I'm then going to have this here will be negative 20, okay, plus y equals 10, and then y is going to equal 30. So this is basically the elimination method. I am going to do a bit more examples later on in the video. You can fast forward, timestamps are below. But now we're going to move into the substitution method. Okay guys, now it's time for the substitution method. Personally, I prefer this method because it can be used more, and when you go on to later grades, it becomes less and less likely that you'll be able to use the elimination method. So I'd recommend you really get familiar with this method because you can use it in more cases than the other. Right? So let's go now. Let's use an example. Let's say we had x plus y, okay, equals 2, and then 2x plus y would then now equal 10. Okay, so 2x, my bad, 2x plus y equals 10. So how the substitution method works is we're going to make one of them the subject of our formula. So let's make y the subject of our formula using the first equation, right? So we'll say y equals 2 minus x. Okay, so now we know that y equals 2 minus x. Both these equations are related to each other. Since we know that y equals 2 minus x, now that we know that the first equation will be y equals 2 minus x, we can then substitute this y in. So we'll have 2x, so I'm using the wrong pen here, we'll have 2x plus 2 minus x equals 10. So can you see what we did here? We took this part here, right? This right here, and we substituted it into this equation right here. Okay, so there's what we're doing. So first we converted it, and then now we substitute it into the next equation, and there's how we finally get this. Okay, so let's now solve for x. We'll then have x plus 2 equals 10, right? And then we'll get x equals 8, and then now we're going to do the same thing we did earlier. Once we have it in this form where x equals 8, we're going to substitute it in to our one of our equations. So we'll have 2 into 8 plus y equals 10. Then we get 16 plus y equals 10, and then we get y equals negative 6. Okay, I hope that was helpful. We're also going to go through those other examples. Like, let's go and look at the one that was trickier for the elimination method and see if it's actually simpler using the substitution method. Okay guys, now we're going to look at the substitution method with the tricky elimination method question. So the tricky elimination method question that we had was 2x plus y. So let's just rewrite that. 2x plus y, okay, equals 2x plus y equals 10. Okay, and then we had 3x plus 2y equals 30. 3x plus 2y equals 30. Okay, so when doing the substitution method, I would always look for where do I have a variable with a coefficient of 1. So if we look at our first equation, you can see that we have 2x plus y equals 10. So there we have a variable with a coefficient of 1. So we can then rewrite this, okay? Rewrite this question where it'll be y, okay, which is now subject to the formula, equals 10 minus 2x. Okay, so now we're going to substitute, use the substitution method, substitute. Okay, and what we're going to have is 3x plus 2 into 10 minus 2x equals 30. Let me write this 30 better for you guys. Equals 30. Okay, so we'll then have 3x plus 20 minus 4x equals 30. Okay, then we're going to have negative x plus 20 equals 30, and we're going to have negative x equals 10, and then we're going to have x equals negative 10. I just want you guys to note, let's look at our answers here, right? For the substitution method for this question, we had x equals 8, y equals minus 6, and here we also had x equals 8, y equals minus 6. For here, the substitution question, we had y equals 30, x equals minus 10, and at the same time here we had x equals minus 10, y we need to figure out. We actually need to figure out y and complete the sum. Okay, so let's see what we're going to get for y. Okay, so then I'll have 2 into minus 10 plus y equals 10 . So I'll have minus 20 plus y equals 10, and then I have y equals 30. So if you guys go and look, you'll see that the answers are the same. So you're going to get the right answer either way. Whichever way you prefer, you can use that way. So now I'm going to go and work through some other examples. I have some exercises for you to do. You guys can pause the video and look at the exercises, and afterwards it'll be me just running through them. Now let's move on to our exercises. Okay, you see, when you can use the elimination method, it's going to be a lot quicker, so let's use it. And when you can use the substitution method, you better be familiar with it. So when looking at this now, we have x plus y equals 1. We're looking at a plus x minus 2y equals 1. If we look at this, we can see that the x has a coefficient of 1 and the other x has a coefficient of 1, so they can cancel each other out. So I will use the substitution method in a case like this. So we have x plus y, okay, equals 1, and then we have x minus 2y equals 1. So what are you going to do in a case like this? Are you going to add or subtract? Since they're both positives, we're going to subtract them. Okay, so I'll have the x's cancel out, right? This negative 2y, since I'm subtracting a negative, it'll then become a positive. So I'm going to have 3y equals, okay, 1 minus 1 is 0. And then I'm going to have that y equals 0 here. So we're going to take the 0 and substitute it in. We're going to have 0 plus y equals 1. And then I'm going to have y equals 1. Okay, so that is our first question done. Let's move on to our second question. Now when we look at our second question, we can see that we have a 3x plus 2y equals 2 and 5x minus 2y equals 18. Now we have y's that have the same coefficient of 2, so we're going to use the elimination method, right? So we have 3x plus 2y equals 2, okay, minus, oh no, see, do not do it where you just assume it's going to be a minus. We need to look at the signs in front of the two y's. We have a positive 2y and a negative 2y, so we're going to add them. Okay, 5x minus 2y equals negative 18. Okay, so we're going to have 8x. Okay, the y's are going to cancel out because positive 2y minus 2y will cancel out, and then left with negative 16, and then we can get x equals minus 2. Let me write this neatly for you. X equals minus 2. Right, so then we're going to substitute this negative 2 into one of our equations. So we can have 3 into minus 2, right, plus 2y equals 2. And we're going to have negative 6 plus 2y equals 2. And then we're going to have 2y equals 8. Okay, so now we have this question done. It's time to move on to, oh sorry, 2y equals 8, y equals 4. Now we have this question done. We can now move on to the next one. On to the third equation. So In this third sum, we can see that our coefficients aren't the same for x or y. So I would now move on to the substitution method. Now with the substitution method, I have to make one of these variables the subject of my formula. I'm going to look for where's the coefficient of x 1. And I have it here. It's in the first equation. I could also do where the coefficient of y is 1. But in this case, we only have x as the coefficient where it's 1. So I'll rewrite this as x equals 14 minus 4y. Okay, I'll then substitute this into the next formula. So I have 3 into 14 minus 4y plus 2y equals 12. I'm then now just going to solve for this. 42 minus 12y plus 2y equals 12. Okay, I'll be left with negative 10y equals negative 30, and then I'll have y equals 3. So now I just take the same y value, put it into one of the equations. I get x plus 4 into 3, and then there's going to equal 6. So I have x plus 12 equals 6. And then that will then leave me with x, oh, wrong pen. That will then leave me with x equals negative 6. That's our third sum done. I hope you guys are getting them right. Time to move on to the fourth sum. So now in this fourth sum, we have 2y plus minus 3x equals 7 and 4y minus 5x equals 21. So again, we don't have anything that has a coefficient that has of 1 for the x and the y, but also we don't have anything that cancels off instantly. So you can use the substitution method, but you can also use the elimination method. So yeah, I'm going to switch back to the elimination method just so you guys can see, if you prefer the elimination method, how to do a sum like this. So you can see where we have 2y minus 3x equals 7. We're going to multiply every term in the 2y minus 3x equals 7 by 2. So we'll be left with 4y minus 6x equals 14. Then we're going to put our other equation below it, 4y minus 5x equals 21. We can now subtract these two, and we're left with the y's cancel out. Because we're subtracting them, this negative 5x will then become a positive 5x. So we're left with minus x equals negative 7, and we'll have x equals 7. We can then substitute this in to one of the equations now that we know that x equals 7. Okay, so I'll have 4y minus 5 into 7 equals 21. And then I'll have 4y minus 35 equals 21. And that will then leave me with 4y equals 56. Okay, and then if you put that into your calculator, you'll see that y equals 14. Perfect. Time to move on to the next sum. Since we have 3x plus 2y equals 6 and 5x plus 3y equals 11, in both cases they don't cancel out. So what we can do here, we need to find a lowest common multiple for either the x or the y. So let's use the y in this case, and the lowest common multiple would be 6. So what do I have to multiply 2y to get 6? And that will be 3. So then that equation will then become 9x plus 6y equals 11. And the lowest common multiple for the 3y will still be 6y. What do I have to multiply it by 2? So every term then I'm going to multiply by 2, and I'll get 10x plus, this is going to be, I multiply all of those by 3. So this is actually going to be 18. So I now have 10x plus 6y equals 22. I can now subtract these, and that they will leave me with negative x, these cancel out, equals negative 4, and then I get x equals 4. Now that we know that x equals 4, right, we can then substitute this x into one of our equations. We can even substitute it into the equation where we multiplied all our terms. Because when you have an equation, let's say we have 3 equals 3. This is an equation because it's an equal side. If I multiply both sides by 2, both sides still equal 6. And what that shows us is, if you do anything to every term in the equation and you manipulate it, you're still going to get the same value. So that is what allows us to do that, if anyone was wondering. Now, since we have that x equals 4, we can now substitute that in. So I'll substitute it into this 10 into 4 plus 6y equals 22. So I'll then get 40. So I'll have 6y equals 22 minus 40. And then that will now leave me with 6y equals negative 18. Then y equals negative 3. This one was slightly trickier, but I hope you guys see how to get the hang of this. Time to move to the final one. I'm sure you guys have looked at it, been reading it. It's scary, has fractions everywhere, but we can do it. On number 6, as I said, some of you guys might get scared with looking at something like this, but when you did it in maths, when you see a sum that looks tricky, try and put it in a form where you do understand it, something that looks familiar. So let's try and remove these fractions. And what number can I multiply each term with in the first equation and second equation, so I let go of both those denominators? So that would be a lowest common multiple for the denominators in the fractions. So for 3 and 2, it's 6. So 6 times that first term will then become 2, because if I had, for example, 6 times 1 over 3, this will then become 6 over 3, and then that's then equal to 2. So that's how I got the 2 on the outside. Now, since we know we got that 2, I'll have 2 into y minus 2 minus, okay, and now we're going to multiply that by 6, which will then be 3 into x minus 1 equals 1, and now I'm left with 2y minus 4 minus 3x plus 3. A negative times a negative is a positive, equals 1. I'm now going to simplify all of this, and I'm going to have 2y minus 3x minus 1 equals 1, and I can rewrite that as 2y minus 3x equals 2. So now that we have all of that, we're going to keep that aside. This is important. So now we have the equation in a form that's easier to work with. So let's do that for the second equation as well. So what's the lowest common multiple for 5 and 4? It'll be 20. So if I multiply the first one by 20, I'll be left with 4. Okay, so I'll be left with 4 into y minus 4 minus 5 into x minus 3 equals 1. Then I'm left with 4y minus 16 minus 5x plus 15 equals 1. And then now I will simplify this. I'll have 4y minus 5x, okay, minus 1 equals 1, and I have 4y minus 5x equals 2. Okay, so now that we have it in this form, we're only working with two equations really, and that's these two equations, because we still have the same equation, just put them in different form. Now in this different form, they're way easier to work with, right? So we can convert this 2y minus 3x into 4y minus 6x, okay, equals 4. Then we keep the other equation the same. The reason we do that is because we want the coefficients to be the same. 4y minus 5x equals 2. We're now going to subtract these. The y's will cancel off. This will now become a plus. So this will become negative x equals negative 2. And we're going to have x equals 2. Now that we know that x equals 2, we can sub it into our equation. So we have 4y minus 6 into 2 equals 4. And that's going to leave us with 4y minus 12 equals 4. 4y equals 16, and then y equals 4. This video is really helpful, and leave a like, comment below how I can make the videos better. I'm still trying to learn. This is the first video I'm making, so if you guys have any tips, I'd really appreciate it, and wish you guys all the best. Any other topics you guys would like me to make videos on, or anything else you want to know, just leave a comment down below. All the best.